All right, welcome to Bitcoin Core App Design Call number 65. As usual, we catch up on the design process and other things happening in the project. And for today, again, I'll share this Google Doc where we keep notes. Anyone's feel free to edit that. I will make it non-editable after the call because someone has been screwing around with Google Docs recently. I picked together a few topics. So there's the conference update by Jarol. Then there's the feedback by MrRGnome. Then we have two ongoing design tasks, which are navigation design and wallet import flow design. Then I don't know if anything's new to talk about on the UX research. And then something we talked about was reviewing the design docs together, but that might be a separate call. So the top two are definitely things we should do today. The other four, I don't think are super priority. Is there, before we hop into any of these topics, is there anything else that we should add to this list? Do you have any preference in terms of priority or anything else?
No.
I think sounds good.
Okay,
Sounds
cool.
Yep.
sounds good to me as well. There's no need to talk about research because there's no updates from my end.
Okay, cool. Then, Harold, it's the stage is yours.
Yeah, so wrapped up the last core dev, had really good conversations on what we're doing here. Fully supportive of us bringing this in and injecting that energy there. It's just, again, about finishing this out. Um, at the same time, there are a couple of things that we do want to keep in mind. BIP 324 is very close. At least the code is very close to being merged within the repo. That does mean a slightly little tweaks to the UI, especially with the peers. I want to get a call, hopefully, with SIPA and see, does he envision anything else? Because BIP 324 and that encrypted transport is pretty important. I wonder what he thinks about a UI and how it would convey to the user, hey, we're operating under this mode or only with certain peers and stuff like that. Assume UTXO is another thing that's decently close, at least in sort of a basic functioning way. And we can get Shores on. He's pretty big on reviewing that now to think about how we'd put in that feature set into the GUI. Although Mo, I think Shores goes to the Amsterdam bit devs, and so I think you guys can also connect there, but we can get him on one of these calls. So again, we have BIP 324. That's the most important thing that we want to fit into the designs now. Then later, assume UTXO. And assume UTXO completely changes how one would onboard, right? You're torrenting the UTXO set instead of going through the IBD as we do it now. Another thing is silent payments is decently close, and Andrew Chow is really doing good work there, refactoring a bunch of things, 40 commit refactors to make it work. But that is a cool feature. It's an important privacy preserving feature. And of course, if it's in the core wallet, the internal core wallet, we want it on the GUI. So we'd want to figure out how that would look like, because you do have to interact in a way or share a certain piece of data. But again, Mo, I think Josie is also at the Amsterdam Bit Devs, and I talked to him, and he said he'd connect with you over there. But
Yeah,
we
so
can get him on the call.
Josie and I actually have a co-working session on the 8th of October, if I remember it off the top of my head. So I'm just going to go over to Amsterdam and we're going to work together on core. So I'll try to, prepare as much as possible and maybe we can chat about that on
Okay,
in
cool.
Discord. Yeah.
And I'm sure I can get him on one of these calls if we need that, or one of the design work calls. And then yeah, and then the last thing would be translations. That's more of a functional thing here, just setting that up quicker because we would want to do some changes with the process. But yeah, that kind of wraps up the updates there from the event. Really supportive from many people. Again, it's just finishing it out on the code side. and we're in a good place there. Oh, Christoph, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks for the update. Not just the code side, we also have a ton of design work to do. And some of this also means going back, like assume UTXO, going
Yeah,
back to the onboarding.
with onboarding, and maybe there's a switch there, and again, how do we convey like normal IBD versus assume UTXO IBD? Because assume UTXO, you will do IBD in the background, so we can go back and forth on that.
Yep. Cool. No, we need design projects. We awesome.
Not to,
Anyone? Oh, go ahead.
not to conflate issues, but a lot of what Jarol is talking about is actually what I want to talk about as well. Specifically, things like assume UTXO and the more complicated onboarding procedure that I think is necessary to actually empower node runners. That maybe even core doesn't really do particularly well at the moment, but which a more reinvigorated UI might strive to do better. Things like explaining exactly the difference between assuming valid and not, between having different mempool settings, things like mempool expiry, accept non-standard, blocks only, things that might be valuable to managing resources, node resources on a more limited device. And more importantly, elevate the user base educationally through the GUI and bring some of these more nuanced config settings to the forefront, where core currently doesn't do that.
Yeah, and again, I guess we'll switch over to your section of the call. But thank you for coming on to talk about or give your opinion on this, because not many people out there that use core want to give their opinion or even talk about how they use core, what they think is important, and all these things. So thank you for coming on the call to talk about that here.
Thank you guys. I'm a critical jerk. I'm kind of walking into an environment that I'm not familiar with. You guys have been doing this for 65 meetings already, and you're already through most of the node stuff, and you've moved on to wallet stuff. And I'm like being like, no. There's something fundamentally that we can address here that would actually be an incredibly valuable bonus to this experience that would make it really valuable.
Yeah, so give it to us.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess the long and short of it is I'd like to see two primary things. I'd like to see the way that we onboard in, for example, GUI QML change. And that, like I said, meshes a lot with things like how we're talking about BIP24 and assume UTXO. And I'd like to see how we manage configuration change. So this is kind of like two different sides of the same coin. We need to initially set up the configuration for users and educate them about what those configuration options even mean so they can make meaningful choices. And that's the real challenge on startup. And that's what I think the wizard should be useful for. We've got tools outside of core, things like Jameson Lopp's config generator, and we also have the reference bitcoin.conf files that come with the Bitcoin Core installation. And both of these things come with very elaborate commentary and explanations of what all the settings are. And while I don't think that we need to support maybe every single setting, I think that especially when accommodating mobile environments, we need to think resource usage management first when it comes to our nodes. I also think that other things like network choices, things like supporting testnet configs, which I know we do implicitly, but we don't do explicitly through the UI. We've got like a notification that we're on testnet, but no mechanism of configuring testnet. Things like that. And honestly, there are a lot of them. There are a lot of settings in core related to resource usage management, and they're not simple and they're not straightforward. And I think it is a real UI design challenge to find a way to bring them to the forefront, and especially before the user even sees many other things, and give them the option of setting a more personalized default or choosing to accept whatever default the core devs have had. But in my mind, empowering users to educate what they want to choose as a default is a dramatically better solution than having core devs argue in the Git issues about what we think is an appropriate amount of resource usage or setting configuration for like assume UTXO or assume valid for users. And I think that this should extend all the way towards the configuration itself. So while we have a wizard process at the start where maybe you might skip through several of the things that are less important to you, you can maybe revisit that wizard or each page in that wizard through the configuration options. And those are the primary things that I'd like to see changed about GUI QML.
Awesome. I have a question. Can you maybe give some example of how, let's say you or someone you know or someone in the other Discord, how you would use those settings differently for different environments or devices? Like how, like
Yep.
there are a lot of, for me, there are technical settings where I'm like, I don't get it. And I've worked with this James and Lop's conf generator before. I've read a lot of stuff and I see like, okay, I can change a number here from 12 to 50, but I don't really know practically what this does. So but your experience with this, so how would you use these for different environments and maybe even use cases?
So, for example, right now I'm running a copy of this GUI in a very limited resources virtual machine. I've got it set to a very tight prune, which I appreciate both you and Core already have kind of a wizard thing for it. I've got it set to testnet. You guys don't support a configuration option for that. I've got it set to a max mempool size of 200 MB because I'm using limited RAM. I've got my accept non-standard to not. I've got data carrier as 0. I've got bare multisig as 0. And my minimum relay fee is also 0 because I'm not particularly worried about being DDoS'd. But if I was, I would raise that. And again, because limited resources, like I don't want my mempool being full of 0 confs or 0 sat. I mean, fee transactions. As well, script parallelization is really useful if you have more resources during IBD. Being able to verify those scripts faster gets over that initial hump, and that initial hump is one of, again, the unique challenges we have designing solutions for Bitcoin Core and getting users used to this very strange, I can't use my software immediately situation. And then there's the log level settings. I, on occasion, have to debug my setup. I have to engage in IPC with other software. And so I need to check my logs. I also, if I'm using it as a wallet, which I rarely would do, I might want to be changing my default confirmation target. I want RBF enabled by default. More often, I want to disable the wallet altogether because it's not usually the case that I feel it's appropriate to be operating a wallet and a node in the same environment. Usually, if I have a wallet on my node, it's because I want a read-only or a watch-only wallet. I don't ever want my keys in my node to be really in the same place. And I just think that that's best practices. Then there's things like max upload. If I'm on a limited mobile related network, it's very likely that I have a limit to how much I'm willing to upload or other bandwidth constraints. There's honestly a lot of settings that a user might be interested in, especially in a more resource confined context.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, this is Yashraj. That that was that was a very detailed list of things and use cases and technical settings. Um, and I ask you like, how would you make a make a trade-off on including some of these in the UI versus like keeping them in the conf file? Would you want all of them or some of them, or how would you make the trade-off?
Yeah, there are so many settings, right? I don't think that it would be appropriate to maybe include all of them in a UI, especially a lot of development related ones. But I do think that it would be important to include resource related configuration options. Relay related configure options are also related to resources, so that's important. I think it's network-related configuration options, and including like what network you're on. I think those are important. I've got a list of what I think could be valuable settings, or a subset of which could be valuable settings. I've listed only maybe 25 or so, but even that's a huge amount of settings. That's a huge amount of like upfront burden for an end user to have to go through at the start. And I get that, and I don't expect that everyone would. In fact, I expect a lot would simply skip through it and accept the defaults. But it's the option, and in my opinion, it's starting users out on an educational path and walking them through the settings and saying, hey, this is an option, this is the default, this is what it means, and this is how it impacts you. And yes, that's incredibly verbose. It's not good UI design, but I think it's good core design.
Yeah, a lot to think there. I think I myself agree with a lot of that. I especially like the part you said about like educating the users, because I think the way that I'm not a dev, so the way that I got educated, or at least partly educated with like some of this, was like reading about these settings and going through Jameson Lopes uh, Bitcoin conf file generator, and I think that does have a lot of explanations around that. And so one approach might be we just like include the whole Bitcoin conf generator as a part of the UI itself. But I think we have so I think I have talked about that. What do you feel about doing just that as like a low effort thing from a product perspective?
Well, wait, but before, so one thing we'll never do with any core binary is edit the conf or anything like that. So that has to be user edited, and we're not gonna. There has historically been an example, and there's no reason why we can't point to the example, but it's just like a principle. We don't want to edit or do anything there for the user.
But you guys are all setting prune already, though, aren't you? And yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree.
So that's settings.json. Settings.json is like where we can edit the settings for these binaries, but we just won't edit bitcoin.conf. We can read from both, right? So we can read from bitcoin.conf if the user edited, or we read from settings.json if that was configured by the user during runtime, but we won't edit the bitcoin.conf.
Could you give me a quick education here, Jarol? Does bitcoin.conf, when edited, overwrite settings.json, and how does that process occur?
Yeah,
Any
it
conflict
does. So the path would be bitcoin.conf over settings.json, and then command line parameters over everything else.
there? That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
But yeah, Yashraj, us doing like a config generator, it won't really work because we just won't do that. But there is an example. So again, the bitcoin.conf is definitely an important file, and that a user can edit it, but we can do also the exact same thing in settings.json, right? And so that's where we edit, that's where we put in settings. So we can do everything there that we could essentially in bitcoin.conf, but we just don't touch bitcoin.conf.
Right. I think the way I should have phrased it uh, would have been, would we probably want to duplicate the UI of the conf generator in some way, and it may not be generating the conf file, or it might be editing that or adding that, or like some other file, the settings.json file. But for the user, it will look like they have all the options that they have in the bitcoin.conf, sorry, in the lobs generator, conf generator. So it would be a long list of setting after setting after setting after setting with explanations. Would that be something that would make sense to you?
It's definitely an idea, and I wonder what the designers think. But yeah, I mean, we would.
Yeah.
I don't know if we would copy it one to one, just because the amount of settings is just insane. But you know, there's definitely an not expert, but a different path on onboarding where again we educated, we every setting is there, and if you do have to know what you're doing, and if you know what you're doing, and if we explain properly, you should be allowed to configure it as much as possible. And be a power user in a sense with that.
Just to give some insight, I typically onboard users Node first, and going over these kinds of settings is something that I have to do with them. It is an educational process. Not everybody does get it. I don't think that we need every part of Jameson Lop's kind of settings generator, but there are probably key parts of it related to resource management and node sovereignty that we do want. And I don't know how many options we would agree that is, but I think that it's a small fraction of the total, and those are the most important to me.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think probably what we, in that case, I mean, what we would need to do anyway is kind of prioritize which these are that get you like the most important stuff, and basically have different chapters is not the right word, but different on the onboarding. You have different, let's say, chapters of the onboarding flow with the general user kind of, like you said, skipping and accepting the defaults. But you could, in each chapter, take kind of the longer tour or the scenic route and configure the things that are important or relevant. And so that might be a way to kind of generally approach it.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit of background. So um, so generally the user experience starts probably on the website, right? Bitcoincore.org currently does not really explain the product very well. In the future, that will hopefully be different. So when you go to the website, you're like, I want to download it for Linux or Mac or for Android. And if I pick Android, it can show me different information. It can say like you're downloading the same binary, but it can say, well, cool, you're running this on a phone. Here are some things to consider. You're running it on a desktop. Here are some things to consider. So we can use the website, which currently the project doesn't use very well to start the whole educational onboarding experience. Like what does a product look like? What does it do? What does it mean to run a node? If you don't care about the node, what can it do for you as a wallet and all that? And then you start it and you have this onboarding experience. And I'll make myself a little bit smaller here. So for the onboarding experience, our approach has pretty much been this of like this little diagram up here. So we break it up into individual topics. Like here, we repeat what this whole application is about, right? And the primary feature of the block log, because it's kind of unexpected. And then we have storage amount, storage destination. We initially also had something in there in an earlier process about your connection. And so we have these kind of individual buckets that kind of mentally make sense, that you kind of step through one by one. And for each one, we kind of have a happy path. This is the good defaults, where you maybe have one, two options, or maybe three. And then for each one, you can dive in. Like you can branch off. If you're not happy with the defaults, you're like, I want to get all the options. You can go in and customize everything. That allows people who don't care about customizing or just don't care about it right now to kind of quickly go through. They understand the core elements of application and they can get going. And then all of these customization subpaths, they're still in the settings available later. So you'll never lose those. You don't have to revisit the wizard. You just go to settings. And some of this is ideally also like cross-linked from other subscreens. Now, when we did when in the earlier discussions, we had a lot of discussions around automatically detecting and intelligently making adjustments. Like if you're on a smartphone, only do the IBD when you're connected to Wi-Fi, that you have a setting for that, and it automatically detects it, and then you like intelligently, or it recommends the pruning setting based on available storage or so, to bake some of that stuff in and then make intelligent recommendations. We have not really, I don't think we've done any of that. I think we have old designs floating around. I just briefly looked for them, but I couldn't find them. So this kind of ideally intelligently giving you some tips on what to do and maybe adjusting the options. Like if you don't have enough room to do the full IBD, then don't even give you that option, right? Because all you can do is prune. Use the pruned option, maybe tell you like this is how it is. Sorry, this is your only option. And then regarding the testnet, that I think was a discussion there around. So from the landing screen, you can go to this little info button here, where you can go to About, and then under Developer Options, only use these if you have development experience, it tells you. And then in there is where we wanted to have the choice between mainnet, testnet. So some of these settings that are really valuable for a developer who maybe later on wants to use the console or some other features or so, those would go in here. And the choice of network would also go in here. So it's not in the primary path, but it's a little bit out of the way. And I think some of it was also a little bit defensively, so people are not scammed so easily, right? Where someone tries to get you set up with the wrong thing and then just to try to trick you out of your Bitcoin or so. So those are some of the points. And yeah, I think there's
Would you
still a
mind
lot more
if
to
I
do.
commented on one of those things that you said there?
Yeah, please do.
I really loved what you had to say about recommendations and tips for the end user. And I think that that philosophy and methodology for providing those recommendations can and should be expanded beyond the scope of initial setup and actually move into, general usage. So for example, like you've set up your node, it's been running for a year, suddenly you're out of disk space. I would love for my node to let me know that I'm running out of disk space and like whether or not I want to reevaluate my prune options. I would love to know when I'm using the wallet features, hey, RBF isn't enabled. This is what RBF means. This is how the fee auctions work. Like, is it something you're interested in? Or would you like to block these pop-ups forever? I think that there's a lot of contexts in the normal operating of a node where we can detect recommendations would be appropriate.
MrRGnome, I have a question for you as well, because I hopped in your community and we did the interview there with you guys as well. You mentioned that you're involved with onboarding new users. Do you have any like documentation that you use to onboard new users, or are you just doing it from your head and customizing it? Do you have like onboarding sessions that you guys do in the community, which are recorded, which maybe we could listen to, or any materials that you're happy to share?
Yeah, we take a community approach to onboarding. We begin by referencing standard communities resources like LOP's aggregated resource site, as well as the Our Bitcoin FAQ. And then from there, we have basically peer pressure is what we use. We've got dozens of very informed users that are very active that guide people in a very hands-on way, in a way that would be difficult to scale through software. But we've found enormously successful. I think that the things that we're doing that are successful that would result in translation to software are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Things like bringing these kinds of configuration options to the forefront and educating about them first. I'm really education first. I'm the kind of guy that spent a whole year studying Bitcoin before I bought it. I don't like people rushing in. I like people to understand what they're doing and making conscious choices about it.
Yeah, I love that approach, and I think I also appreciate that the all the education things that you are doing on that uh, on that front. I also feel like I think what some of what we have been focusing on in the current big design is is also some focus on the users who maybe don't want to do that, or don't have the time or resources or whatever to probably not want to do that. And I think that's where this happy path thing is coming in. And I think that is also a pretty valid use case. I mean, if you're looking at maybe uh, Bitcoin Core on like a mobile device, I think the idea is to get Bitcoin Core in the hands of lots and lots of users who might not be technically oriented or even interested, but we want them, and they want to be self-sovereign, and so they don't want to use like third-party applications or be having to trust third parties. I think that was a lot of the thinking behind this kind of a UI direction.
I agree and I understand. Yeah, but I think the reality is that I personally have never met a user of any sophistication level that wants to go through a whole bunch of this config nonsense. They just often they don't even know it exists in the first place. It's not something they go out seeking, and when they are confronted with it, like, learning's a mental burden. It's not a good UX to have to learn. Intuitiveness is, something that UI design puts first and foremost. But I think the reality of a sovereignty related verified application is kind of a different operating context than most software, and a lot of intuitive UI norms have to meet the challenge of this educational burden.
I also think there's a lot of small stuff we can do. Like if you look at this thing here in the background, it says script verifications thread 0. Well, I don't even
Yeah,
know
I
like
assume
what's
that's par. I assume
right?
that's PAR setting in conf. It allows you
Yeah.
to IBD faster, right?
Yeah, that's par. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, this UI doesn't tell me like, is there a minimum? Is there a maximum? Can it be negative? Can it be 50 million? What's
Yeah.
appropriate for my device? Is it, if I'm on mobile, what should it be? And then if I actually change it, then what do I look out for? Like I think there's a lot of small stuff with all of these settings that you just contextually provide just a little bit more help, and then bring them up as needed in, and also like I said earlier, in the onboarding and then the settings, just categorize them, give it a little bit more explanation on things. And as there are so many different settings, people might just discover them over time. So we should just kind of make sure we layer things in a nice way.
There was one more thing that you touched on that I wanted to talk about, and that was the block clock UI.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very interesting UI, but I'll be honest, even with the explanation page, I had to reverse engineer it to understand what it was doing. And like, for example, the peer count below the clock number, I didn't know what those dots meant. I had to figure out what those dots meant. The like kind of daytime thing going along the outside, like didn't understand what that meant. I had to go, and it kind of seems to me self-defeating to be explaining intuitive UIs and to be spending, our wizard GUIs explaining these intuitive UIs instead of explaining Bitcoin.
Yeah, I can't find stuff here in these designs. Yeah, for sure. We've gotten some feedback too, and there's some stuff missing there from like you should be able to just hover all these things and it should tell you what it is about. But
Pretty
yeah,
sure in that specific page, it's just an image at the moment. It's not the actual block clock that's in the tutorial wizard page. It's just a picture of it, I think.
Oh yeah. That's let me see. It's probably this one here. Right. Yeah, that's one of the unique features of this whole thing for sure, and it needs to be introduced properly. Sorry, someone's wanted to say something, and I keep interrupting.
It just made me think about we could, how sometimes when you run an application, it'll like guide you through through certain parts. We could borrow that to explain the block clock a bit. Either that or sort of an information button that brings up a new modal on top of it that highlights each aspect and could explain. But it's true. I think we have so much domain knowledge on the block clock that we here understand, but I'm not sure if people outside will immediately understand what it's doing. So I think that's valid. Where, yeah, we could think about how to explain what it does.
If I could, the way that I would like to see it explained how it does isn't actually with a UI, like a dedicated wizard GUI. It would be like you're saying, like hovering alt text. I think would be really functional to show me what those different parts of that are, and then I don't need a dedicated explanation. I can just see it through using it, what it's doing. Like I can be interested in this rich user interface thing that's basically the primary and oftentimes only thing I see. Like I'm going to interact with it. And that's another thing. Like that was the first thing I tried to do, was interact with it. I thought maybe that I might get more information out of it. I might get like the actual block information of what I'm looking at. I might see my process and the verification process, like I would in Bitcoin Core or in Bitcoin D. But instead I just paused it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in terms of interactivity of the block clock that could be exploited as well.
I have another question as well. You mentioned that the community that you guys have is primarily you guys promote Node first, the Node first approach. Do you think that once we've built out the Node GUI and we have more designs with that, and we have a prototype going, that the community would be happy to run through some of those designs with us?
That's exactly why I'm here, is because I think that this will be of huge use to that community
Perfect.
as well as many others.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Good to hear that.
I will find these designs.
But yeah, all valid criticisms. I think we do have to find a place in the middle, because again, we can't. Bitcoin Core can be like airplane software where you have 100 different or 1,000 different knobs, and they all do these different things. And at least within the GUI, if we had to do that, and again, that's not what you're suggesting. But if we had to accommodate for everything, it would just become unusable software again, right? But finding somewhere in the middle where people can customize it as powerfully as possible, or you can be as happy as possible and just use the defaults, go right through it. But in each case, we're still educating the user on what it is their node is doing. Running a node is a very powerful and personal thing, and it's not some other type of easy application.
Strongly agree with all that.
Yeah, so I can't find everything, but here's a thing where I outline the different areas, interactive areas of the block clock, where you could hover or tap the peer dots and it tells you what's going on. You could tap or hover the block time to change it between, I don't know, different displays or so. And then the icon here that was meant for pausing, but I don't know if that's going to work because that's a bit of a surprise, especially on mobile. And then potentially also being able to tap that dial itself. And then there were some other ideas for widgets to be added maybe at some point.
Those widgets are beautiful. I love those widgets.
Awesome. So these are really made up. There's no basis on any actual real data usage, but I'd love to hear what information you would like to see. So the idea here was basically that you can just have this dial in the center, but if you wanted to, you could add 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these widgets, whatever you would find interesting. But has no development or other thought, has been just pure concept.
I think this concept is amazing. I think whether it's as widgets, and I don't see a single widget here that I don't want in some capacity, whether it's as widget or whether it's as like an interactive medium where the block clock itself is an interactive GUI that expands and collapses with different information depending on how you're clicking on it or interacting with it. I think that might be cool too. But yeah, this gets me excited, what you're showing me right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody who sees this gets excited. And Christoph did I think he said he based initially some of them on an Apple Watch face or something like that, but the options that he created here are so amazing. And yeah, I think I totally agree with you that I see these and I want to see each and every one of them. Maybe in my head, if I'm reaching, I'd say it could be a dashboard. I launch Bitcoin Core and I have a dashboard full of these widgets, and I can change, remove, add things. It will be a super highly visual thing. I love this too.
These widgets, I'm also, I entered into the space as a very non-technical user. I still consider myself to be non-technical, even though I understand most of the stuff we talk about. But, putting myself in the shoes of a new user, and seeing these widgets in a very accessible place on the GUI or in the GUI would make me feel that sort of peace of mind is like, I know what's going on. And there's always somewhere where I can go back to so I can constantly know what's going on. It's creating that sort of reassurance for the person using it that they're doing the right thing, which I think is also a big, when doing the user interviews as well. A lot of people were turned away from using the GUI just because they just didn't really feel that they had a full hands-on of what was really going on, and then it was eating up space on their computer. It was making the computer slower, and then they were like, oh well, I'm just gonna uninstall this because I don't know what's going on. So yeah, it's a very good one.
I mean, the fundamental idea, and this was something that Jarol really pushed a lot, and I think for very good reasons, is that the idea with the block log was to make running a node something that you enjoy. Like you might put up a phone or an iPad or whatever it is somewhere in the corner, and it's like a work of interactive art that you look at, that you enjoy having in your space. That it becomes something that's not just some weird random process that runs in the background, but it's become something a little bit magical in a way.
That's exactly how I feel about my node. I feel like it is magical, and my first discovery of all of these settings was through things like Jameson Lops config, like Yash was saying. This is how a lot of users get exposed to even awareness of what is possible through their node. And I think the GUI should do that job. Show me what's possible through my node, inspire me, get me excited. A widget that I'd like to see that I didn't see on there, maybe it was, is things like orphan information would be really valuable to me, and any upcoming potential forks that I'm aware of would be very valuable to me.
Could you do that without pinging a third party?
You get the activated and pending fork-related information from core, and I think that you would have to aggregate orphan data yourself if you wanted to collect it. Much as I don't know, wouldn't you have to also do the aggregate data yourself for average block time?
I mean, like I said, none of these widgets are founded in reality.
Point being that we have the data to do the math somewhere, even if it is, a job. But that kind of network state and consensus related information, I don't see anywhere, and I think would be really unique and powerful.
Yeah, especially if you're running a GUI, you should know what bits you've activated, right? You should be able to audit these things that your node is running. Again, a GUI could lie to you, right? But at least within the core GUI, we're not lying to you. So, we should display all these pieces of information that are there on the node. So I'm looking at these widgets. Most of these are definitely possible. Yeah, almost all of these are possible. Third-party data or paying third parties, that can always be opt-in. But something like, I don't know, a fiat price or something, that's something we'd never do. But if there's pieces of information that somebody wants to opt into, that's something we could consider, and they can opt in. Although looking here, I don't see the reason why we need to ping any third party for these.
Yeah, I'm pretty against pinging a third party. I'd like to get whatever I need from the node.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so we have about 10, 12 minutes left in this call. And like just one, I mean, these are all really awesome ideas, but one of the practical things is how do we actually get there, right? How do we make all of this stuff happen? So far, with the version 1 of the application, it was about building this kind of minimal node runner, getting the technical foundation set up, making sure this thing even works at all, and even the layouts kind of translate well between desktop and mobile, just to get this basic thing even working. And we know that there's polish to do still, right? And lots of things that we kind of left out in development. Now with version 2, the big goal with the next 8 design milestones is to kind of reach the GUI parity. So kind of, like maybe replace it. I don't know if that's on the table or however that's going to work, but just kind of reach that parity. And then after that, then it's probably wide open, right? What happens next? And some of it will be driven by new features coming in, and weird consensus stuff where everyone says what they want to work on and whatnot. Yeah, I'd love to see those ridges also built tomorrow, but I think it's definitely going to be. We'll have to build this very consistently, very intentionally, little by little, right?
Christoph, if I wanted to contribute to this project, and I do, like on a code level, what's the process for approaching that? Could you reference me some contributor documents or something so that I could start getting my feet wet?
I will send that question to Jarol.
Yeah, we can connect. Are you on the Bitcoin Core app Discord?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you can find me on there, same username, and I'll send over all the information, and we'll connect on getting you onboarded to contribute.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. No, good to have anybody want to contribute.
Yeah, that'd be
So
super
thank you.
cool.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool. So in terms of the process, like this is a little bit more of our design call, where we try to go through these 8 design milestones. We're working way ahead of development, just trying to get all this design sorted out to reach all of those kind of this wallet feature parity. That's the focus right now. And in development, the focus is currently to finish up this 1.1 polish milestone. Some of the smaller things that did not totally make it into the version 1. But Jarol, you might have a better. I mean, you guys can also talk separately. Yep. And Jarol, where you and Hebasto and Johnny, where else do you chat? Is it IRC or?
We chat on the Discord primarily now since it's convenient. We're all there. Bitcoin Core in general chats on IRC.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. Jarol is the person to talk to about development process.
This was valuable feedback. Glad to onboard you as a contributor, and thanks for hopping on the call.
Thank you guys for being so open. Don't mean to derail with development stuff.
Not at all. I hope all this experience and your insights really flow into this. Like for me personally, I also help with another project, Saving Satoshi, that's about Bitcoin development, and I clearly know the educational content where I cannot help at all, and the developer crew kind of has to figure that out. And I think with this kind of practical, hands-on node management, I think your experience. Both doing it yourself and also helping other people get on board will be super helpful.
Glad to be part of the team. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we have 8 minutes. Would you like to chat about anything else? Continue the conversation? Wrap up early? Michael, do you want to go in the forest behind you? Looks beautiful. Cloudy mist.
Yeah, I have to go to the forest still, but yeah. No, I think the wallet import stuff we probably leave to next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to get caught up on all these different things that happened while I was gone for 10 days or so. So I'll go through that in the Discord. And you guys recorded the call. I haven't watched it yet, but I'll watch it right after this and get caught up on that.
Yeah, there's one call we didn't record. We forgot about it. I think it was 2 weeks ago or so. But there's one call we also skipped. I think everyone was traveling or out. But yeah, last week's should be up there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I guess if there's no other topics, or Michael, you were saying something?
No, I just wanted to mention, if you watched the call from last week, the designs are updated already. But so if you go into Figma, you'll see something different than you see in the call.
Okay.
That's just a little caveat, but we'll go through it next week.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and one decision or one discussion is actually very relevant to this, to what we talked about today. That is, if during onboarding you get to the option that say create a new wallet or import a wallet, and you might want to say no, thank you, I just want to use this as a node runner, and then you kind of the path split just a little bit to kind of make it allow that path too, and not shove wallet features necessarily into people's faces, so they can also kind of avoid that. Did you get that in, Michael?
Yeah, that's in.
Cool.
But then, so what I wanted to discuss, if whether I laid out basically three options, like node only, wallet only, which I don't know if that exists actually, or both, which we don't recommend, right? So that goes into the part about education and setting smart default without restricting users too much. But yeah, that's in kind of one suggestion. And if somebody says currently it's at the end of the onboarding flow, but we might, if we allow a wallet only configuration, like just a watch only wallet, then it needs to go probably at the beginning, because then you can skip node stuff, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So a lot of people just only have one device. They're never going to be able to split it up. So it's not helpful for them if we tell them to buy something else. But let's say I do have an old Android phone and I keep it just running here as a node, and then I have my other phone or my desktop, and I just use that to connect and use that as my engine, and my other device I have the wallet running. That'd be an interesting one. The remote node idea.
I strongly agree with Michael.
At least with the core code base, right now you couldn't do that. You couldn't have a wallet only mode where there is no node behind it, because first it has to be a node. But I mean, if you have a node, you can always use it with whatever other wallet software or external signer. It's just within the core code base right now, we couldn't have a mode where it's just like a wallet that's going to connect to another node. It doesn't mean that it can't be refactored later on. It's just that right now we can't do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah, but that's exactly the type of stuff that then basically would mean that it makes sense to have this screen where it is right now, and just remove this wallet only option. But that's just, I mean, these are things that, because I'm fairly new to the topic, that we just review next week, and I'll take it out. And we rearrange stuff. So yeah, have a look at that.
And we document them so we don't have the same conversation 5 times in the next 2 years.
Right.
Yeah, we can even in the documentation link to the timestamp of the call that we discussed it in.
True.
I think it's really important what Michael's saying. It is not good operating practice to be running a node at a wall at the same time. And like he's stressing, I think it's important that we educate users about that and allow them to do it if they want. But that like we at the very front be like, hey, do you want to operate node only? Do you want to operate just a wallet? And if you do want to operate a wallet, like Jarol's saying, like that basically means like import like LDK or something, because or don't do that.
Yeah, at least at least we want to discourage software keys, but having your node and using an external signer and using it with core is perfectly fine. And especially you're using your node to broadcast your own transaction. But if you have all of that running on the same device and you have all these different applications and who knows what the user system has in terms of malware, a software key and the wallet is unencrypted is definitely something we want to completely discourage people from doing.
Something cool we could do here. So at some point, the UI will be perfect and it's going to explain everything just perfectly, right? But in the meantime, and until then, maybe we can just put together some Google Docs and some other docs or whatever it is, and just kind of write down where we think kind of how people should be using this, and then we can kind of slowly figure out how and where to fit all of that stuff in the UI.
That approach makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep. Yeah, this was an awesome call. Good to be back. Good to see everyone again. And let's hit the ground running and hit our remaining milestones we got to hit, and let's ship this.
Awesome. In 2 weeks, let's get it live.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, every milestone done.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you all for joining. Let's continue in Discord. And I'm going to stop the recording now. If anyone has watched this, congratulations. Well, on YouTube or so. Thanks for tuning in.
All right.